Welcome, welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning
Morning.
on election day.
Yeah, week after time change day where everybody's confused about everything.
Oh, I just got a card from a friend, and it was like a birthday card or a get well card. And it said, "Dear USA, good luck with your IQ test today. The world."
Yeah, I do not assume that we are all on the same page politically. So it's a, it's a tricky one. All right. Welcome. Hmm. Okay, welcome to week 8. Returning the vessel is what we're talking about today. We'll start with meditation. I'm just feeling the drop in attention towards the self. If it feels comfortable to close your eyes, you're welcome to. And we're going to play around with and feel around outside of the body, outside of the body. Maybe playing with the idea that the body is hosted in a larger vehicle, that the essence of us expands much further than the limits of the physicality. And in playing with this, maybe just relax into the field. Get curious about what's around and outside of us. How far out does our essence or energy go? Does it feel differently right close to the skin than it does further away? What if you relaxed and let the field be more of who you are? Just play with the experiment of being more of the field than your physical body. What does that feel like? See if you can feel a rhythm or a tone or a flavor of this space around you. A color, maybe, a density, a lightness. Relaxing into the field. Just letting go of the physical and feeling the lightness of just the essence of you. The ancients used to call the, the etheric field that we ride in our chariot, that we ride in a chariot of something larger. Call it soul, call it spirit. See if you can feel that something larger around you. and behind you, as well as to the sides and in front. See if that can be as much you as what you often or what you usually think of as you. What happens to your system when you focus on that larger essence? Just notice. Just notice. Is there a sweet spot in that space? Too far might feel disconnected, and too close might feel something. There might be a sweet spot of that space around you that feels particularly yummy. Hang out there. And then see if you can sort of juxtapose, go back and forth between how you identify as the physical self and then this larger essence. See if there's a both and that's available. And when you're ready, let's slowly come back into where your body's touching the physical supports, be it feet or butt or back or hands or arms, or just begin to settle in, back in, physical form, feeling the heartbeat. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Invite you to play with this meditation. You don't really need much other than this awareness of this larger field. But if you are interested, I really like Joe Dispenza. He does some good meditations of this sort. If you're on Gaia has a great meditation series by Joe Dispenza. Otherwise, you could probably find it on YouTube. Really interesting counterpoint to the embodied component, like what's here. Would anyone like to share a beloved dead this week? An ancestor of yours, someone who hasn't shared yet, name and just a little bit about them. Linny.
This is my beloved first cousin, and we grew up together. And somehow I ended up living at this point already 20 more years than she did. So it's a mystery. And it reminds me, she reminds me of the mystery. Yeah. So we miss her.
Are you open to sharing her name?
Yes. Her name was Susan Babcock.
Susan Babcock. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
First cousins can be special places in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of shared reality, a lot of shared genetics, a lot of shared biology, a lot of shared reality.
Go way back,
Yeah.
like your siblings,
Right.
Gosh.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lenny.
Yes.
All right. Give me a minute to share. I didn't share screen. All right, it's a John O'Donohue kind of day today. It's always a John O'Donohue kind of day. Ah, may you recognize in your life the presence, power, and light of your soul. May you recognize in your life the presence, power, and light of your soul. May you realize that you are never alone, that your soul and its brightness and belonging connects you intimately with the rhythm of the universe. May you realize you are never alone, that your soul and its brightness and belonging connects you intimately with the rhythm of the universe. So, big week last week. Tuning into the soul's blueprint, we talked about working with trauma, being resourced and gentle, and finding good people to help with trauma, that our genius is embedded and sort of entangled in a way, soulmates with our trauma, and then going into our fears releases our essence and our blueprint. Really big stuff to contemplate. We talked about psychedelics and the gift that they are to us at this time. We talked specifically about ketamine and MDMA and psilocybin and toad, specifically in the context of a death practice. Some folks offered themselves as resources for more info on that. I haven't received any chats from anybody. I don't know if anybody else has. We talked about deep dive best practices, specifically with both trauma and the psychedelic experience, which is having a guide, a relationship to the inner life, support structures, a container and context for our experience, waiting and slowly. Some folks brought up absolutely integration and then honoring historical and ancestral traditions. So we didn't have a chance really to break into groups last week. I sort of wanted to check in, like, how's everybody doing about all that? Is there still a desire to process some of that or do breakout discussion groups? We can make time for that today if that's still alive for folks. I just sort of wanted to get a feel for that. Anybody want to share? Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, I really like the breakout groups because it gives everyone a much larger chance to talk.
Yeah.
And so
Anybody else resonate with that for today to process a little bit from last week? I'm hearing that. Okay, I'm hearing that. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and process some more from week 7. So Anna, you can set up breakout rooms. Let's do 3 folks each and we'll do, how does 12 minutes sound? Does that sound good?
longer the better.
Longer is better? Okay. Yeah, and Day of the Dead, I'd love to hear, your celebrations, but we'll do that maybe when we come back. So let's do 12 minutes, 3 people each. We'll process some from last week, which is, the trauma components, the psychedelics and the practice of dying, celebrating the Day of the Dead, anything that's alive for you around that stuff. And then we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about any Day of the Dead celebrations that folks want to share. Jeannie says she's driving, do not need to be placed into a group. Okay, that's fine, Jeannie. I think you can still talk while you're driving, and then, yeah, we can come back and do archetypes today as well. Let us know when you're ready, Anna.
All good now.
Great. See you on the other side. Welcome back. Anyone want to share about your shares or about your Day of the Dead celebrations? Carla. Oh, I don't, maybe she wasn't raising her hand. Anybody want to share? Linda.
Yeah, our group, I thought it was wonderful to be able to talk to people about this openly. I live in a very conservative state and didn't have a chance to do that. And this was a wonderful time. I look forward to talking to more people here on the website too, connecting by email and other things.
Yeah, that is actually a segue of a little housekeeping piece I wanted to ask you all. I'd like to put everybody on the same email string and send out an email so you have each other's email. And so if you're not okay with that, let me know so I can leave your email off or in the BCC. But it's really nice to have a contact list because people send me things. Like just this week, people sent me a couple different things that I was like, I don't know how to curate this and send it out to the whole group. Maybe people would be interested, maybe they wouldn't. But if you all start sharing with each other, then I feel like it takes me out of the middle and you can just sort of update and share. So let me know if you have any concerns about that. Becky.
I did share with you a picture of the altar that we had here in my community this past weekend, and it was really sweet to work with a fairly new member of the community whose husband died earlier this year. They had been married for 70 years. Yeah. And he spent a lot of his life, well, he was in Mexico for like junior high and high school, and then they would go back and travel a lot throughout Mexico. So it was very, very connecting for her to have that space. And I was thinking, Lee, about your sharing about how it can be very intimate. And I know like someone's cat died the day before and she didn't come and she usually does. She just wasn't ready to be in that group space for grief or even celebration. So I just appreciate as I continue to connect with death positive practices to just be deepening and appreciating more about how this is easier for some people and harder for others to
Yeah.
walk into that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I mean, when we're in acute grief, we feel like we're turned inside out, and it's just we're so raw, and so we might be, in a moment feeling buoyantly death positive, but that is not as sometimes a match for people who are in an acute place. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. Any other shares?
I did share a picture with you. I don't know if you got it in the email because I
I
can't
did.
share it here, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll put out the contact list after class today, and then folks can start sharing with each other. And if somebody feels like they want to do a different kind of thread or, Google group or something, feel free. But I'll at least share the email list. Okay. All right. I do want to talk about archetypes because it was something I wanted to share last week, and we got so caught up, which is awesome. And this is part of a project I'd love for you to consider if it speaks to you that on our solstice celebration, which is our sort of optional day together, that we can, if you take on a project of exploring, researching, and getting familiar with an archetype that really speaks to you, we can use that day as an opportunity to share. And I'd love to learn about what your archetypes are. I'd love to learn a bit more about death archetypes, but I'll just share a couple of mine to give you, to wet your whistle and sort of like orient you to what I'm talking about when I say archetypes. Um, and, you know, this is one of my archetypes, is the vulture or the condor. And I really love this death archetype because they exist and feed and are nourished by dead bodies. And so they're tracking death constantly. And they're really majestic creatures. And they're quite endangered, especially the big condors the world over are quite endangered. And we talked a little bit about sky burials, and usually what's eating the bodies of humans if they're put up in a high place is these condors. And they are also in Tibet and Nepal called Dakini, which means sky dweller. And they came to me in a medicine journey at some point as like they are the ultimate psychopomp. Psychopomp is a word in shamanism which means um, they're helping travel with the spirit as it leaves the body and enters the next realm. And so they're the ultimate psychopomp workers. They take the flesh, they eat it, they soar up to the highest heights. And so they're transporting the essence of the beloved. So I really love, and we don't have condors here on the East Coast. I think there's California condors, and there are condors in Peru and some places in South America, and then there's condors in Asia. But we have beautiful turkey vultures and other things here, and they're really a huge part of my life. They're part of my practice. Like I see them almost every day, and deep reverence to them. So I love having them as an archetype. And then my other really close, very long-term archetype is Kali Ma, who is a Hindu goddess. And she's the goddess of many things. And sometimes she's interchangeable with Durga, or there's Durga Kali Ma, but really her stance and the symbols on her represent all kinds of very important things. There's human heads around her neck, which represent the 8 nooses or emotions which catch us up. And then the arms around her waist are about cutting off the karma. And there's a skull and a scythe and other tools, and noose in her hand. And I think from an archetypal perspective, the idea is she's cutting away the false self. She's burning and cutting away anything that is not our full essence. And so, the way that we are scared of her is from the place that doesn't want to acknowledge the impermanence. So she's been a huge teacher for me as well, and I have a strong relationship with her. But I wanted to, give you a list of potential archetypes around death so you could maybe think about it. And the word archetypes I think of as this larger than life characteristic that is universal in nature. So we all sort of resonate with it. We all sort of like get them download. We get the mind meld of something. And I think archetypes help us understand things from different perspectives and angles. So I just wrote a list here. You can take a photo of this or a screenshot of this, or you'll see it in the slides. And it's just a list of possible archetypes that you might want to explore that could really just touch you and be a support for you as you're deepening into your own death preparation process. So I have a little list here: nature, or some kind of natural process, or animal spirits, or spirit guide. Um, I love this idea of the worthy opponent. I don't know if you all know Rilke. Rilke has a fabulous poem in which he says, "What we choose to fight is so tiny, and what fights us is so great." Um, and then he goes on to say, winning doesn't tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by greater and greater beings. So the idea of death as the worthy opponent might be appealing, or the life cycle in nature, like Pele or the phoenix rising. I have down here medicines, like we talked about bufo or ayahuasca or the caduceus, even, this weaving of life and death that is represented in the caduceus. I think any of the death preparation characteristics could be archetypes, receiving as an archetype, or letting go or surrendering. Um, yeah, being a death walker, we talked about that. There was someone here, maybe it was Madison, I'm not sure, but just like, people somehow get the sense of like, I've known I've been a death walker my whole life. I've always wanted to talk about death, or this idea of psychopomp. What does it mean to transport the souls from the living to the realm of the dead? And then there's sort of old European goddesses, who were all about the fecundity of nature and reincarnation and regeneration, and death is going back through the portal to the womb of something larger. And, sort of new religion is the ones who invented hell. And monotheism. But in these old European myths, we traveled by the river and the chariot to the underworld. And so these Indo-Europeans really sort of took over a lot of these old religions, but I think it's worth digging up and finding some information on them. And my friend Alicia wrote a fabulous book about sort of sort of goddess culture called Before War. And she named a bunch of priestesses in there, and I was really interested in. So the Egyptian goddess Mot, Jezebel, who is the priestess of Astarte and Baal, the Baltic priestess Rogana, and then in Poland there was Jedza, in Basque there's Ari, the Irish had Morgan, the Russians had Baba Yaga, there's the Black Madonna all over the world, but certainly the Middle East and Southern Europe. And then there's sort of underworld archetypes. The sister of Inanna was Ereshkigal, and Persephone and Demeter, Scorpio and Pluto, and then Hermes, such a classic underworld archetype, right? So I'll stop there, but just say that's my invitation, or sort of my proposal for what, part of what we do on our solstice celebration is hear from you all about the archetypes that really touch you and speak to you, that you've woven into your life. Any thoughts about that? Anybody feel drawn to a certain archetype? What do you feel drawn to, Heather?
I feel drawn to
I don't think we can anybody else hear her? There's something weird going on, love. Like I hear the echo of your voice, but
Is it any?
yeah, that's better. Yep.
Okay. I'm on a new computer that's working a little wonkily, but yeah, the archetype I identify with is the Valkyrie or the Valkyrie. I really love that one.
What's that one?
So that one is the story of the Valkyrie is, the women who well, the beings, the women who would fly over war-torn areas and choose who would die essentially, and tend to those that they're kind of like psychopomps, from my understanding, that they would choose who would die in war and tend to their souls.
Excellent. I love that. I can't wait to hear about that. Bring pictures. Everybody, drawings or pictures. I'm so excited. Thank you. Becky H., do you have an archetype in mind?
Well, I just want to say the Valkyrie also has a wonderful theme, Flight of the Valkyrie, the opera. Just the change in the image of the Grim Reaper over the years. it used to be that he was evil and stole souls and killed people. And it has changed in media over the last couple of years to be a comforter and someone who is there at the time of death to hold your hand and escort you to the next place and tell you it's okay.
I
And
love
just I
that.
love the change in that image.
Yeah, a progression of sorts. I like that a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
like that. Thank you. Who
thanks.
else? What other archetypes are sparking for people? Lenny.
I don't know much about archetypes, but I'm immediately drawn to ones that their story is something about recreating, I should say, over and over and over again. I don't know what sort of goddess that would be, but
Yeah, the regeneration goddesses, the old European goddesses, for sure. Regeneration, the life, death, life. Yeah, I hope somebody does the second birth into the womb thing. That is so, I want to hear more about that. So maybe somebody will choose that. Lumen.
Yeah, I love as an animal totem or an archetype, the animal, the cockroach. Um, the cockroach is like the trash eater and the shit eater that like everything that we reject, just like death, everything that we throw away or we want to ignore, the cockroach is there uh, to transform it and make it something um, nourishing and regenerative for itself. And it is an animal that has remained relatively unchanged for millions of years. And so, in its own divine way, it's absolutely perfect. It doesn't change, it doesn't need to change. And similar to like the vulture, I see it as an usher of death or just decay. And I love that about cockroach.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's awesome. Great. So more on archetypes at solstice, and I think you can incubate your project. I think it can be as simple as, this particular archetype speaks to me because of XYZ, or hey, I did all this research and found off all this stuff, and here's some photos. Like I think anywhere in between. We probably only have, a few minutes each to present, so that maybe will help. But hopefully this will be something you can put on your altar or, be a guide for you. So with that, let's go ahead and take a 5 minute and we'll be back and talk more about the vessel, returning the vessel. All right, welcome back. Returning the vessel. So this week and next week, we're going to talk about after death choices. I love this little quote. I wanted to share this with you too. I hope death is like being carried to your bedroom when you were a child and fell asleep on the couch during a family party. I hope you can hear the laughter from the next room. Thought that was so sweet. So there is some paperwork involved in this bucket to remind you of the 3 buckets. The returning the vessel bucket is after death care. There is a list of paperwork. Probably won't get to the paperwork today. We'll probably get to it next week. We'll see. Organ donation, disposition of body, cremation and burial, authorization, spiritual funeral arrangements, sort of after death body care, and a death certificate as well, which I'm going to talk all about that. Hopefully this helps organize the brain a little bit. And I wanted to give you a little bit of my story. How many people were in Nikki Ann's class this past weekend? She did, I see Brenda. Anybody else? Can't see all your hands at once, so maybe. She did a half-day introduction to death care at Earth Haven Eco Village. Nikki Ann is a dear beloved friend, and we started this nonprofit to get this. We started a school together. It's called the School of Integrated Living back many years ago, and that's now the nonprofit for Earth Haven. And anyway, she taught a half day about this. So, Brenda and some others, you're going to hear a little bit of a repeat from my perspectives, but we had a series of deaths at Earth Haven Eco Village from 2016 to 2018 that really changed our lives in so many ways. And I can give a little bit of context for the community. It's sort of a 300 acre private income rural eco village project about 50 minutes southeast of Asheville, North Carolina. And in being land-based, we started very ambitious. We wanted to build all our own homes. We wanted to fell all our own trees. We wanted to live off grid and produce all of our own electricity, water, all of that stuff. And it was really hard going in the early years for many, many years. And there's more infrastructure there now, obviously, than there used to be. And we also needed to really create our own governance systems and figure out conflict resolution and how to own land together and grow food and all this crazy stuff. So we weren't super focused on death. And then death came to us, and it happened multiple times, 6 times over the course of 2 years. We had 6 deaths. And so it really catapulted us into this whole inquiry. And I talk a lot about this in my community-based death class, which is I've never felt so connected in community. I mean, I've lived in community for, this year I left community, but, it was close to 30 years. And when these deaths happened, it was, at least 20. I'd been living in community. And so I wasn't some kind of, in some honeymoon phase with community, but it was the closest, most synergistic I've ever felt in all the community years. I think because death really created this time out of mind experience. And we just we're all boom and sort of in non-ordinary reality together. This is a photo of a bunch of us, Nikki Ann included, around the body of a woman named Kimchi Rylander, who was a dear, dear beloved, who died quite young, from my perspective, since I think she was my age when she died. She was 56 yeah, 56. And she knew she was dying. She was dying for about 6 months, and she wanted to make her exit an educational opportunity in conscious end of life experiences. And we had a death care team, and we met regularly. And she made incredible choices. And this home that she died in was the home of my friend Martha, who gave up her home so Kimchi could live in it and die in it because it had a bathroom and it didn't have stairs, and Kimchi's having a hard time getting around. So there's a lot of rustic dwelling places at Earth Haven. And Kimchi was one of these extreme extroverts who had a ton of what we call in community social capital. And so lots of people really gathered around her death, and it was very specifically, her unique passing. But because she really wanted her death to be an educational experience, I have photos, which is great, and I can share them with you. We tended her body after death most of the day. Actually, she died on a Thursday night. And all day Friday, we told stories and sang to her and told her whole life story, told stories about her, talked to her. It was an incredible, incredible experience, did ritual. And we don't get this experience much in our modern culture because bodies are whisked away after death. And it's really an extended opportunity to say goodbye. It allows the living to grieve, and according to the Buddhist tradition, which we've been mentored in, it allows the spirit to have transition time and to know what's happening, to be guided to what's next for them. Yeah, I have a little link to a video from the Sophia Center that's all about natural death care, which we're going to talk some about next week. But we were in deep ritual together, and then we laid her out in a common space in our common building. Let me put this in the chat now so I don't forget. Okay, that's the video from the Sophia Center. We laid Kimchi out in the common center with a beautiful altar there that with candles burning and flowers refreshed and dry ice. We use dry ice under the body and keep the room cool. And then visiting hours happen all day, and then everyone is welcome at any time, and then we never leave the body alone. Someone sleeps in the space with the body, so it's really a communal effort to really tend this sacred space. Here's someone at the sort of altar of the grief altar with her there. And part of what I learned in community is that the oxytocin, that is the bonding hormone that is released at birth and at death and at orgasm, right? It's intended to bond us. So I think part of why we all felt so connected to each other is we had sort of a single focus. This death is in front of us. We're now in non-ordinary reality, but we also had all of this bonding hormone within us, because when someone dies, it really does impact in concentric circles, really in high amounts during the death process. It ripples out. And the lying in state process or the wake process is so sacred. I think in funeral homes, it's quite sterile and dry, but to be able to engage with the body, to actually be able to touch the body, to talk to the body, to be there, to sing together, it's quite powerful. It's quite powerful. This is another of our beloved community members, Patricia Allison, who passed during that 2-year time frame. We always do natural death care. We do everything. We were doing everything at home. It's just how we lived, and we didn't use any kind of preservation other than the ice, really no makeup. Yeah, I don't know, I'm going to put this link to Anna. Maybe you can grab these links and add them. There's caring for our own at death is a whole conversation. We could do a whole course on it, and I really love this topic. I study with others because I feel like I'm still learning, but we're going to talk about that. Like, how do we do even small things that care for our own at death? And what that means is that we can take some level of responsibility for our beloved and have some involvement. And it can mean a vigil, and it can mean, just being with the body for an hour or two at the hospital. It can mean a lot of different things. This is an image of a mom and a child being up in front of the altar of one of their dear friends, this man, Chuck Marsh, who died in our community. And the kids are sort of in and out of those spaces and part of the funeral. And, I know some grown people who've never seen a dead body. Some of us, it took us a while to actually see a dead body. And for the children to normalize this and for the parents to be tuned in with, like, what do the kids need to integrate, it just becomes a healthy part of life. And so it's part of what we're, in community, I think we're trying to do. This is a grave digging image, which, because we have 3 days where the vigil is happening, we have time to dig the grave. And it, generally speaking, falls along gender lines. The men are out digging the grave, and the women are tending the hearth and the fire and the food and the body. But not always. There's some crossover. And it's hard work to dig a grave by hand, especially in our deep, rich, thick, red soil clay in the South. And we have so far not used machines for this task. We've hand dug just for the ceremonial component to it. And it sort of works stuff out, right? This is our council hall, and when it's time for the funeral, we generally move the body from wherever it's lying in state, and we've had vigil in sort of a more private place into this more public space and sort of a larger sized venue so more people can fit. And at Kimchi's funeral, I think must have been 200 people there. And folks gather outside. We often have a gathering, where people get to speak about the beloved, and we tend to wrap the body at this point for the funeral service, cover the face and hands and wrap it with flowers, and it's in a shroud here, still with us in the room, and prepare it for walking to the grave. And this is a procession. This was Patricia Allison's procession carrying the body using a tote. This is the tote that we use. It's a canvas reusable tote with a bunch of handles on it. So it's not just 6 big, strong guys who have to carry a big, heavy coffin. But if the body's in a shroud, these are all women carrying this particular body. And you can see not every handle is even taken. So it's much easier to work with. This is a body by a gravesite on the tote still, wrapped in a shroud. We have moved away from our first death. I think we used coffin, but we've just moved away from coffins and just wrapped the body with sacred cord and flowers, and then use straps to put it down into the grave. And that all happens when we're there together. This is another body wrapped with flowers. This is a bigger view. So the body's near the hole of the grave and there's people all around. This was Kim Chi's funeral. Green burial refers to the practice of putting an unembalmed body into a shroud or biodegradable coffin. They have cardboard coffins and placing them directly into the earth. So I think I'll put a couple links, Green Burial Council, Grave Matters. There's so many fabulous, fabulous resources out there. There's also something called the Natural Home Funeral Alliance. So much to say about this too. So, right. This is lowering the body into the grave. The family members did that, and decorating the grave at the end. I do want to show this little tiny short video, but I need to stop my share to make sure I have the sound on. So hold on one second. I'm going to share again. Okay, share sound, share. Okay. And so this is a little video of Kim Chi's burial. And so we're done with funeral, we're done with procession, and we had our service at the gravesite, put the body in the ground, and then folks are shoveling soil on top of her. And she died on February 16th, in the evening of February 16th, and her birthday was February 20th. So the vigil took us through the 17th, 18th, 19th, and we buried her on her birthday. So you'll hear you'll hear people saying happy birthday, Kim Chi, at the end. All right.
Happy birthday.
You like some good digging.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop there. And I share that whole slideshow to you to give you a sense of what's possible in life. And by no means do I want to hold up an unachievable or idealistic standard that you have to compare yourself to. Because most of us are not in a situation where we have this sort of intact social system to be able to do these things. And so, groups like Earth Haven or other communities are pioneering this for us, but I do show it to us. So I want to caution to be like, if I can't have this, then everything is less than, because that's not really the point. The point is what pieces or components from this really speak to you. And what small ways would you want to incorporate some of these things into a loved one that passes in your lifetime, or that you might want to incorporate into your own process of transition and burial and funeral? Any thoughts, questions, feedback on all of that? Yeah, Brenda.
I'll just say that Nikki Ann's workshop presentation on Saturday was, I mean, it was such sacred space. It felt like a real honoring of the people that she, talked about how they died in community. And, for me, it's about living in community, aging in community, dying in community, and then grieving in community. And, as a mental health practitioner, I know that's the ideal to do all of that in community, but I believe we were not created to do any of that alone. And the way she presented how the community embraced, the dying and the grieving, was just so beautiful and so sacred. And it felt, I don't know what the word, but it just felt comfortable.
Yeah.
It felt like, oh, now I can, because I mean, I come from seeing people die in the ICU on machines. And I believe there's a reason that I started my medical career with that experience, because then the contrast is just, it's kind of blowing my mind away at this point. And it just felt so sacred and so comfortable. And it just felt like there was it was the community really came together in a way that there was not any one person that had the burden of any of the processes. Everyone had a job to do, even if it was just holding sacred space and just sending, and just sitting with someone and just being.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah. I mean, Nikki Ann would never say this because she's her, but I think I even said this once before in class too, here, that she tends to be the center pole of the whole thing in community. Like everybody needs a Nikki Ann because she's sort of like everything radiates out from her in a way when people die. And I don't know, I don't think it was like that early on, but it's just a role she stepped more and more and more into. And so, she's sort of the orchestra conductor in a way. And leadership has to emerge, and I think it takes a lot of sophistication to navigate those realms. And yeah, if you get a chance to take that class with her, it's what I just did, but it's a whole afternoon of that. It's going into much more depth. Yeah, so I invite you to check in with yourself of what components of that light you up. And you may not get them because they may not be accessible, but you can have elements of them. I did want to talk a little bit about your choices for body. And let's do that a little bit, and then we can do a break in a breakout room, because there's a lot. When we start talking about this, I notice like it really hits deeply for people, and like it takes a lot of integration. So let me share here. I'll just say a little bit about conventional practices. And I come from more of a environmental perspective on these, little bit of like, we don't have great choices. They're getting better. Yes. Okay. So every year, more than 55 million people die worldwide. And in the United States, it's sort of split half these days. Half people get conventional burial, half people get cremation. And it's a lot of toxicity. There's about 30 million board feet of hardwoods and about 3,000 tons of copper and bronze and over 100,000 tons of steel actually buried with these coffins. And there's also like 1.5 million tons of concrete. So it's really a lot of stuff that goes into the ground. Um, and then embalming fluid, it's almost 100,000 gallons of embalming fluid. So that's every year. Every year. And then cremation isn't a whole lot better. It releases about 500,000 tons of greenhouse gases with a lot of mercury. People have mercury in their teeth and they get burned. And so, yeah, we're at about half of the people in the US who die are cremated, and it's about 500 pounds of carbon dioxide per body. But there are alternatives, and there's no shame, no foul. If this is what your family does, is if this is what you do, find a way to celebrate it. It is changing, it will change, and don't let that stop you from being present in the process, even if it may not be a burial that in your ideal world is what you would want. But for yourself, make sure you write down what you want, because if you don't, then this is the kind of thing that you will get. Green burial is so exciting. There is, a whole national movement of conservation burial and green burial. Conservation burial grounds are places like one we have here in Western North Carolina, which is called Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, and they have really specific guidelines. They have no toxic chemicals, just only natural grave markers, biodegradable burial materials. They don't do concrete or steel vaults at all. They have minimal, green burial in general, but these conservation are, they're putting the land in conservation. So yes, there's bodies there, but they're beautiful places to hike through. You'd never even know. Like there's small stones, and you have to have a GPS locator to actually find the graves sometimes. And it's really, such a beautiful idea that is likely going to catch on. And there's nothing new about natural burials. Before industrialization, that's how we all were buried, right? That's how our ancestors were all buried. Green burials are usually less expensive, right? Because the caskets are very expensive. For me, I would always feel more connected to the shroud. It's like there's the person, they're right here with me instead of buried in a box. But that's personal preference. There's a composting of bodies, recompose. They basically take the body and compost it back into the soil, and then you sort of get back a bundle that you can put in your garden. The last I checked, around $6,000 it would cost for something like that. And then, of course, I think you have to get the body there, which right now it's in Washington State. I don't know where else they exist. There was a TED Talk about this mushroom burial suit. Not sure how famous these got. They're called the infinity burial suit, made up of mushrooms and microorganisms, which, once the body is put in it, it's put in underground. It's like it aids the decomposition, it neutralizes toxins, and it transfers nutrients to the soil. Oh my goodness, my kitty is having a little panic attack. It's okay. It's okay. So that's something you could check out. There's in Italy, they created these egg capsules, these capsula mundis. It puts the body in more like a fetal position into these egg-shaped places, and then you can, it's like a pod, and then you can plant a tree on top of it. They have small ones for ashes as well. So those are interesting. I haven't seen them really catch on in the United States, but it's kind of a cool idea. And then I discovered this other really cool thing called eternal reefs, which is that if you cremate yourself and then you want to do something interesting with the ashes, they create a reef ball out of it and helps restore the marine habitats that attract fish and other organisms. And it's at eternalreefs.com. So that's kind of cool if you want to be part of the fish life. And then there's North Carolina is got this process called aquamation, which is the it was the only complete aquamation facility in the US, and it's called alkaline hydrolysis. They call it a gentle, environmental friendly alternative to fire cremation. They say it's water-based. I sometimes think of it like, on those murder mystery movies when somebody, puts a body in a bucket of lye, and it all disintegrates. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what's happening here. It's like they're acidifying it so much that it breaks down. Um, and so it dissolves the soft tissues and then there's some bone fragments and metals left behind. So it's pretty environmentally friendly, but not as available. Again, you have to get the body to some of these facilities, which is its own thing. There is donation of your body. This is a body farm. This is really interesting. There are body farms in, I don't know, like 10 different university systems. The University of Tennessee, Western Carolina, close to me, some of us has it, Texas State, Houston State, Southern Illinois, Colorado Mesa, and the University of Florida have places where they're doing research around decay and decomposition, so you can donate your body, and they'll like in this case they just sometimes put the body out in the forest, or they bury it 2 inches or 6 inches or 6 feet, and they just like documenting and researching. So that's sort of interesting. And then there are all kinds of ways that you can donate your body to science, right? This is yeah, that you can donate it to, most public universities will take it for cadaver research by medical students and other things. And there are companies that broker these things. Like, you can sign up ahead of time. You might have to qualify. You might have to have an application. You might have to have a signature. I need to shut my door. I'll be right back. Sweetie, honey, you see puppy. Oh, I know. Sorry about that. She's very insistent. So let me stop there. All of this, we can talk about all of this and I can say what I know and other people may know as much or more. But it's going to take some research. Does anybody feel drawn to something on this list that they maybe know about or they'd like to know more about? Yeah, Lumen.
I would love to know. Oh, I would love to know more about the body composting, the recomposition, or whatever that was. That's not something that I've heard of before, and also the mycelial suit. Both of these processes seem just so next to nature that I'm very curious.
Yeah. Yeah, the Recompose is the website. They have a really great article. I think I have those all posted on the resources for this week. And someone was just telling me they got a body back from, who was that? Was it someone here? Someone was just telling me like it was quite a bit of soil, because they obviously add soil to the body, and then like how they keep that body separate from other bodies. I have no idea how they're doing it. But what a great idea, like make your petunias brighter. Alan.
I've been fascinated with Recompose since I first heard about it. So I'm just on their email list, and they have individual, somewhat hexagonal tubes what you see in the wall, and each holds one body and the composting material. And you can either get the entirety of the finished compost or get bags of it. I simply read this on the website.
Right. And then, yeah, you have to get the body to them is the interesting thing. Do they still only have like one site? out west in Washington State or something?
I believe so because it has to be concurrent with composting becoming legal in various
Mhm.
states.
Right, right.
But I believe there is some effort like that in California, and I don't know the details.
Right, right. Okay, cool. I see Becky H and then Jeff.
Hey, I have just a certain fascination with the New Orleans slow cremation in the vaults, where it's the above ground vault that cremates the body over a year just using the sun,
Ah,
and then your bones are pushed back, and they fall into a hole under the vault with all the other bones of all your. If it's a family vault, it's of your ancestors, or if it's a community vault, and the bones are just all mixed up. Um, and my church in Virginia has a communal cremation area where we dig a hole, put your ashes, and everybody's ashes are just mixed together.
hmm.
So you're there. A a plaque on the wall with your name, but there's not one specific square inch where your body is. Everybody's ashes are mixed together.
Okay, thank you.
And
I hadn't heard of this slow cremation thing. That's sounds fascinating.
it's the New Orleans above ground vaults.
Okay,
That's
cool.
how they work. I've been reading. They're fascinating.
That's great. Thank you.
Just one more question.
Yeah,
You were
please.
talking about Nikki Ann in classes. I was just wondering if there was like a link to her
Mm-hmm.
information.
Mm-hmm.
If you could post that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Let me find that. Hold on a second, Jeff. Yeah,
Sorry, Jeff.
that's okay. I wanted to get it. Yeah, schoolofintegratedliving.org is the organization, and here's her home funerals, home burials class. I'll put it in the chat, and then hopefully Anna can take it and add it to our resources this week. Great. Jeff.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the composting. I had a good conversation with the owner of Earth Funeral, which is a new company. I'm in California. California passed the law to allow composting last year, but it doesn't come into effect until 2027.
Got it.
So the companies are now preparing their locations to do the composting in California, but they won't be able to operate them until 2027. There's a company in Washington and Oregon, up Portland, that is now doing it. And there's one also in Utah that just started. Or is it Nevada? Nevada, I think. But it's not
Gotcha.
there yet.
Right.
In anticipation of the
It's
law.
coming. Yeah, there's no stopping it. It's coming.
And the basic essentials are you have to take the body to their place. It takes 45 days for the total body to turn into soil. And after 45 days, it'll give you a cubic yard of soil. And
That's not very long. Wow, that's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
because
great.
they're analyzing it all and they have all these sensors for moisture, temperature, acidity, and it's very engineered. And it
Got it.
decreases time for composting all the time.
Right, high tech. Excellent. Thank you so much.
So I guess that's not very natural, but I like the idea of becoming compost.
I know. Take your microorganisms and put them back in the garden. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Heather said, do you know which two states? I heard Jeff, you saying California, Oregon, Washington, and there may be others. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, I think considerations here are also like, do you have family, kids, or other people that would have a hard time with one of these choices? And would it be better to make a more conventional choice? I would say talk to your families, talk to your healthcare agents, and we're going to talk a little bit about how do we turn healthcare agents into death care agents also? Like, are these healthcare agents willing to be guiding the process of your death care? So let's go ahead and take 3 minutes and come back and we'll continue this discussion. Okay, so we're just going into 10-minute breakout rooms with 2 people, so you'll have a little more time, and your task is to talk about your wishes for your body. What areas would you like to explore or research more? Where would you like your body to rest? Whenever you're ready, Anna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear what y'all are thinking about, feeling about all of this.
Lee, I just had a question. I posted in the chat before, but I figured I would just ask, is there anything like known about, and maybe this is kind of what you were speaking to, Brenda, about like legalities of hauling a non-living body across state lines?
Yeah, somebody else has asked that in the last class. I mean, it sounds like you know more than I do, Brenda. I mean, it's a bit of the wild, wild west to go to the morgue and be like, can I have that body? And, we haven't done any paperwork. Like, we just, like there was a release form, but like, who owns the body? I think there's different states. It's a great question that I don't actually know the answer of around moving over state lines. I think certainly locally, they give you the side eye for sure and resist. It's possible, as Brenda was saying, that it's going to come to a place where you need to get some kind of funeral director to sign off on it. That's not been true for us. But there may be some protocols that get put in place, and I would bet it's different in every state. That'll be my guess. Heather, do you have thoughts about this?
Not about this specifically. I
Okay.
wish I had the answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I was just gonna say I'm so curious about green burial options, and it's really the first time my wheels have been spinning about it. Um, and I am listed as an organ donor, and I'm curious how that would impact a green burial, if at all. Um, yeah, because I'm like, oh, I might need to shift that.
Yeah. Yeah, this does get into really big questions, and I think we can spend a little time here, see how far we get with this today. But the idea of lying in state for 72 hours, which is, some people's tradition, or some amount of time, where this spirit is hanging out with the body, or there's this, opportunity to be with the body. It's more or less mutually exclusive from organ donation. I think Brenda was saying to us that yes, maybe even after you could still harvest this or that or something, but after 3 days, I just don't imagine. No, after 3 days. So if you're wanting to do vigil, you cannot do organ donation. And if you're wanting to do organ donation, the question is, can they do some harvesting, and is there still a body afterwards to take back home? Depending on what parts of the organs, like that would be sort of a way more nuanced conversation to have, with whoever is in charge of usually what they do is they receive the body for organ donations, they harvest what they harvest, they send it to the morgue, and then it's like going to a closed casket in a funeral home. Like that's their procedure. And or their body's going on to cremation or something. Like people aren't, generally speaking, people are not engaging with the body after organ donation. Generally, that's the protocol. And if you wanted to do something, some hybrid, it would be a pioneering endeavor. You'd have to like figure it out. You'd have to get the right forms. You'd have to make sure that your death care team or whoever was on it was really aware of those instructions. The chances of things going wrong are probably quite high if you're trying to forge a new path. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Brenda, please.
Yeah, I'll just mention that there is a way to do corneal and skin donation as part of a home funeral and not be in the hospital or at the morgue or I mean, there is a way to do that. That would, again, that would be on the margins of what could potentially happen. Also, so I'm doing a green burial, and I'm just kind of reminding myself that everything has to be biodegradable. What your body's wrapped in, if you want a casket or not, or that has to all be biodegradable. No toxic embalming fluids or anything. And if in this cemetery, if you do want a grave marker, that they have to be stone or wood and laying flat on the ground. So most places are very specific, and I think each green cemetery has their own procedures and policies. And when I went, so after the last class, this is my second time I've done this class. When I went to Penn Forest, it was an amazing experience. And I would highly recommend, even if you're not really there yet with actually acting on it, just to get the information was a very helpful process.
Yeah. Our conservation burial ground here outside of Asheville has tours regularly, and you can go on a tour. They have bird walks. They have all kinds of different things going on there. It's very sweet. So you can get on their mailing list. And if there's one near you, there's not as many in the United States as is going to meet everybody's needs, but there are, I don't know, a dozen or so, I think, something like that. Carla, I see you commenting if families get upset with organ donation because there's no body. Yeah. There's several rules and regulations to consider when transporting deceased persons across state lines. Permits, burial transit permit is required. Okay, that's awesome. Embalming, some states require embalming before crossing state lines. Shipping container, the body must be in a sealed shipping container to prevent seepage. Transportation method, the distance to be traveled and who is providing will determine whether the journey is carried out by road or air. Yeah, so it sounds like there's some red tape going on there. That is a good question. So Carla says my father died in another state and we didn't even know where his body was for 40 hours. He had chosen cremation. Our mom was not at all upset. Was not at all upset that she couldn't say goodbye to the corpse. His ashes were delivered. Yeah, I mean, if that is the case or someone's dying while traveling, you might have to have a less than ideal situation because it might just cost a ton of money or be a super big hassle. So this is where, sort of compromising might be helpful. Heather, did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, Becky H.
I just wanted to say that I was really impressed by the idea of the two gents that I was chatting with about being of service after death. They were talking about composting the body. And then one of the places that is the cremation center, not cremation, the composting center, a lot of people don't pick up the bodies. So they've bought a bunch of woodlands, and they're using the compost to restore after forest fires or landslides or something like that. And just the thought of being of service after death was just really it really struck me. Thank you.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. Yeah, this vigil question is a really big one because, because we're in a situation where sort of either organ donation or vigil is, it really brings up deep questions for people. Yeah. And the vigil process and the ceremonial process of being with the body, is really impactful if there's a way, and not everyone can do that. I walked a friend through his mother's death this spring, 3 months of process, and every day we were on the phone together. And at the end, they wanted to come and take the body right away. And he was really, really upset by that and didn't feel empowered, and the cremation center was really pressuring him. And, you need to have it here. And I wasn't there with him as he was in another state in Texas, but if I had been, I would have done something like, it's our spiritual tradition, it's our religious tradition to be with the body. Like, you need to back off. You need to like give us the outside time. They get nervous when people don't want to release the body for various reasons, I'm sure. I'm sure there's horror stories of people not getting rid of the body and being more difficult, but also like how to work with these agencies and organizations, either bringing fierceness if it's required, or bringing relationality if it's possible. And someone put in this is, a home funeral director. It's like, I'm in the conscious death capital of the country here, and I don't know anybody who's a home funeral director that's working independently, that's not working for a funeral home. Like, we don't have one. There's not enough business to keep that person employed. Although my friend Meredith, who I put her email address in the resources, says she's always willing to receive. She's a funeral director. She works for a funeral home, and she's willing to help people do home funerals, and she's willing to give advice. But she can't like sign off on things because it wouldn't be through her funeral home. So yeah, I don't, I hopefully that's going to be happening more and more. Hopefully, maybe there'll be enough home funerals that we can have a full-time home funeral director in our region. Sacred Crossings. Yeah, that's great, Satya. Yeah, I've heard of them in LA. Yeah, that's great. And guiding people, being a resource for biodegradable cardboard coffins, being a resource for helping people at home. And right now it's just being done on the very grassroots levels. Our mentors, the Buddhists that I was telling you about, they mentored us, and then we would just donate to them because we couldn't pay them because they weren't certified funeral directors. Denise.
Talking about home funerals, this sort of strikes me as similar to the movement for home birthing, and taking the beginning of life out of the hands of this medical institution that maybe unknowingly, but actually causes a lot of trauma and a lot of health problems the way they handle it. And so it seems like, yeah, this is similar. Like, let's take the beginning of life out of the hands of the institutions, and now let's think about taking the end of life out of it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, right. It's like medicalizing. We don't need to medicalize birth and death unless there's medical issues, in which case it's great to have that. But it's, in a certain percentage of the time, it's not necessary.
yeah, I was really struck by that clip you showed. The burial was so very, very different, and probably because people had had those 3 days to really process.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
really, really just a totally different vibe.
Yeah, we had a death of a child in our community that was sort of kicked off all of the deaths that we had over this 2 year period of time, and it was sort of a tragic situation. And I wrote an article about it. I think it's linked on my website, but I can highlight it. And it was such a horrifying experience, and we were all in so much shock. It happened on a Friday. And we had the funeral. The funeral was on a Monday, but we were all together for 3 full days. and, wailing and grieving, and the fires continually going and singing and chanting and moving and grieving and just like being in our process like we were. And the parents, were in a multi-year, underworld journey. It's been such a big deal. And yet for all of us who were holding that space for 3 days, I watched, it was very interesting. I watched folks come for the funeral on Monday, and they were sort of shell-shocked. Like they were like frozen. Like they hadn't had those 3 days to process what we had to process through. And it's not like, we were over it. It's just that we had done so much integration and so much grief, moving the shock, being together, that those folks who just came for the funeral didn't have access to. And I really saw the difference. Those vigil days, are really important. They're important for everyone. And what the industrialization of our death process has done is just taking that completely out of our hands. And even if we can't do some, burial, home burial, home burial is legal in all 50 states with lots of caveats. Obviously I live in an apartment building, it's not, but you have to be a certain amount of feet from a building, from a water source, from this and that, but it's legal in 50 states. It's one of the things that can't be taken away from us, is our right to bury our own dead. And so private property laws and all of those. But I think the point here is those are, if you don't want to pioneer a bunch of crazy burial stuff, which I completely get, the very least we can do is be with the body a little longer than we're often given. And even if, again, I say it again, like even in the hospital, you can ask for a few hours. I want to put some roses out here. I want to wash the body some, even if it's just the hands and feet or the face. I want to sing. I want to pray. I want to be with this beloved. They will accommodate you. They are getting better and better at that. And so, yeah, I think that, not to dissuade people from organ donation, but also just emphasizing the importance of these vigil days on the living and the dead. Has anybody been a part of a vigil and they could speak to that some? Becky, you want to share?
Sure. The first one I remember was my neighbor, also a Buddhist, and I helped put the dry ice around her body. And as people would come to the house in groups, we would share stories, we would sing songs together. And this was true for that was Marcia, for Ginger, for Dirk, for other folks who, but I wasn't there the whole time. I wasn't part of a crew that was there the whole time. And I think that piece would be extra significant. So kind of looking forward to that next one to step up to that part of the experience.
I have a link for the techno ice packs that my friend Meredith uses and recommends. It's on the resources this week. And if you wanted to look ahead about buying some of those techno ice packs, that could be a piece that you just switch them out. Yeah. Mary Marty.
16 years ago, my dad died in a small group home for elders and had his own private room. And a small group of us, my two sons and their wives and so on, were there. And we had an extra 2 or 3 hours after he died. And the harpist who had come to play the day before came again. And we anointed his body and touched and spoke together. And then he was, then he was taken away and gone through the familiar things that people do when he was flown to Wisconsin for burial. And my family didn't feel any need to go to Wisconsin to the burial. We had such a beautiful experience just being there that extra couple of hours.
Beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. Heather?
Yeah, similar to Becky, I wasn't in attendance for the entirety of the time, but had the honor of being with Courtney Brooke for about 2 days um, at Earth Haven. So that, yeah, I have no words. I was just, and to this day, I'm so deeply touched by that vigil and ceremony and getting to honor her in that way.
I didn't realize that connection because you were friends.
So we were just starting to get to know each other. I'm really close with Lena, and Lena introduced us. So
Nice.
yeah.
Oh, beautiful. So beautiful. Great. Yeah. I think there's enough time for me to introduce you to some end of life paperwork around this. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is a document that you have access to. I think it's in the preliminaries, and I'll make sure it's this week. It's called Declaration Regarding Disposition of Physical Body After Death. And this is a form that comes from our mentors. And one of those mentors went on to start the conservation burial, the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary near us. So they're very deep in this world. And it basically goes through, a very in-depth process of what happens to the body after death. And it's completely editable. So if there's things that you don't agree with on here, please, feel free to change it. I'm provided it in a Word document. But the basic idea of it is, hey, I've thought about this. I'm of sound mind. I'm over 21, and here's how I want my body tended to after my death. It says first, autopsy is a violation of my spiritual convictions. After death has taken place, I want, nothing, no embalming, no artificial preservation, and then, for 72 hours, I want a vigil, and that these are my funeral services or requests or wishes. And the reason that this piece of this document is it's sort of a handmade thing, and there is a part for notarization on the back, is because it seems to me like when people are breaking out and pioneering new ways of being, that sometimes families balk at that, and they don't agree, or they want something different. And so this is just one of these documents that's intended to be safeguarding the preferences. So I would take your time, and like templates, like all of the templates that we've worked with so far, it's a great place to start, and then you can make it your own. So that's really a great thing to do. And if you have a very clear preference, it might be worth going ahead and ordering or purchasing that service, whether that's a burial plot, and a conventional cemetery, or a conservation, whether it's a cremation or compost or any of these things. If you go ahead and sort of pay for that up front, then your receipt can be copied and put into your documents. And I would say, creating a death care team is much like creating a healthcare team or a healthcare agent. It's a matter of talking to someone in your life and saying, hey, taking this class, these are my preferences for after death. And generally speaking, I would imagine that the healthcare agent would roll over and become the death care agent. There is really no such formal thing. There's no state form or federal form that's like who's in charge of your death or your body. But this is a really good do-it-yourself form that spells those things out. And then, yeah. And then once you're clear about that, you can go back to the fifth wish under the 5 wishes and add, say, see addendum or see this declaration regarding disposition of the physical body. Any questions on that?
Could you just scroll down so we can read the form?
Yeah. The 4th is I request that my family, friends, and religious group make the following funeral service arrangements. And then 5th is no fewer than 72 hours after my death, my physical body shall be buried or cremated. My remains shall be disposed of as following. And then it just goes on to say, like, this is really important to me. These are my spiritual beliefs. And this is going to remain true for me unless I revoke it. And then the back has a signature and notarization. It is sort of very strong language because, again, I think anything outside of the norm has to really be sort of sanctified by people. Otherwise, you're going to sort of get the tried and true path. Lumen.
Can you clarify for me this form that you just showed us? That is for whom, or like under what circumstance are we provided, like offering this form?
So this form is called Declaration Regarding Disposition of Physical Body After Death, and it's for everyone. And I have it in my paperwork and advise everybody to have it in theirs because it gives a sketch of what you want done with your body. How you want vigil handled, how you want the transition after death handled, how you want your body handled. So I recommend it for everyone here.
So it's just it's another form that goes along with our 5 wishes, the dementia directive, everything that's going in our knockbox, essentially.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. No, I don't see that form under resources. Did I put it under preliminaries? Let me look real quick under preliminaries. Yeah, I'll make sure it's under this week's print these forms checklist. Yeah, I need to get that link for you. Yeah, I need to put that in this week's resources. And, we talked about sort of redundancy and, if you have organ donation and you're changing your mind about that, I think it might make sense to have some sort of form about that. Like, I think that's through like the driver's license people. How do you fill that out? Like through the DMV? Okay.
It's through the DMV.
Yeah. Yeah, so be mindful about that. How are folks feeling who, the organ donation piece and the vigil piece? How's that living in people? Lenny?
How are people feeling about giving up the idea of being a donor?
Well, the complexities of that. Yeah.
I did take it off my license and it had been on there since I was 16, but I did take it off because of the mechanics and the refrigerators and all of that. I just want to, yeah, it was too complicated for me.
You're wanting a more natural transition.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. It becomes a conundrum for sure. Becky, did you have something to share?
Yeah, well, I definitely was listening when Brenda shared that sometimes you can donate your corneas and skin, and I'd like to look more into that
Yeah.
because I like that. And on my driver's license, it says an organ donor, so need to follow through on what does that mean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I really like the idea of vigil, and that's very consistent. My neighbor, before he stopped eating and drinking, had been a doctor at UNC, and he called the hospital and said, in about 20 days, there'll be a cadaver for you to pick up at 122 Circadian Way and give it. He was donating it to the school, and they did. And then they returned the body as ashes after he donated his body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like more and more people are not really engaging with the body and then not even having a memorial or funeral right away and just having something later when it's convenient. And, that's a whole cultural phenomenon. And I'm not here to say whether that's, better or worse or good or bad. I don't know. I just, how it feels to me is that we've begun to make death inconvenient, much like we've made birth inconvenient. And like, is that serving us? I think, I have mixed feelings about it because on one hand, I really get it. And on the other hand, dropping into, this almost shamanic mystical experience that is taking time out for important death in our lives. I don't know that we want to lose touch with that. And that is like the thread of holistic culture in a way. So, um, there's no criticism. I get it. Like we live very full, busy, efficient lives. How do we reconcile these things? How do we keep meaning? How do we keep um, reverence, ceremony, sacredness, and meaning in the midst of some of these choices? These are real alive questions for me. Yeah. So somebody just had their hand up that I missed.
Did, but
Mary
it's
Marty,
so,
yes.
it's so late. I'm stuck in this place between my family's tradition of a Catholic burial, with the casket, and definitely don't want that. Yet I'm not in a community where I think anybody has the capability to do what you did in your community of 3 days. And it's like, oh boy, right in between, and have lots of research to do there about what's possible.
Yeah, I think death doulas is another good place to start. Like, who are the death doulas in your region? And like some death doulas are, very experienced registered nurses, and some death doulas are hospice MDs, and some death doulas are, funeral directors. Like, I think, they just range. Some death doulas are people, who have, have very little experience. So it's just like a whole big range. But if you find a death doula who's willing to do some of those pieces for your loved ones, it might be something you can arrange ahead of time and, make a provision for them, a financial provision for them in your will, and make sure that the executor takes care of them. But yeah, there's a whole lot. I mean, Satya can speak to this. There's probably others who've gone through death doula training programs. I think Brenda even has done it. And, it's like they're being underutilized right now because the culture hasn't really caught up. But, I bet there's so many death doulas who would be delighted to help plan that with you,
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Satya says. All right, I'm going to read you our last quote. I'll share my screen here. Another John O'Donohue, beginning and ending with John O'Donohue today. The greatest privilege of a human life is to become a midwife to the birth of the soul. The greatest privilege of a human life is to become a midwife to the birth of the soul. Blessed, beloved John O'Donohue. So your homework for this week, is researching, contemplating the disposition of body options, continue contemplating what's most alive for you. I'd love to hear more from you about, yeah, some of the stuff we did last week. We might have more time next week. We covered a lot today, so we're a little bit ahead for next week. So if there's specific things that still feel like there's threads or we want to talk more about or unpack more, I feel like we're going to have a little time next week. So, and I will share the contact list as well. Anything else? All right. Blessings. I'll hang around for a while in case people want to chat. Bye.
Lee, I have a question for you.
Thanks, sweetie. Yay.
Where would I start my research around legalities regarding my my funeral? If I want to go a non-traditional way, but I just don't know what's legal or what the what loopholes I'm looking for. Where would I start?
Yeah. I think the easiest option, like the baseline easiest option, is to work with a funeral director that is willing to do alternative funerals, right, in their funeral home and be like, hey, I don't want to stress out my loved ones, but I'd like something alternative. Like, are you collaborating with people? And I would refer you to Meredith Spring. She's amazing. She lives down in Hendersonville. She works up in Madison County. And that's the kind of thing where funeral homes are going to have to, it's a very strong good old boys club in the funeral industry. You'll find very few women in funeral director positions, and you'll find very little alternative stuff. So they're going to have to either figure it out or they're going to die off at some point as we sort of forge this new path. So that's the very easiest entry point, is like, how can I work with a funeral director that is hip to some of the things I might want? And then from there, it's going to be like progressively more complicated DIY situations. And, working with death doulas or working with having conversations with people who are like, hey, I know you did that home thing. Like, where did you get the confidence or the information, or say talking to people about it, like where you did a vigil at your house and then you did a normal burial, or so gathering information, really, I would say.
Okay. All right.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I'll see if Meredith can come next week. That would be sweet. It's very short notice, but you all would probably love to meet her, and she's just a real wealth of information.
I'm remembering somebody was going to offer the mystery song again.
Oh, right. Dara was. Yeah, I forgot again. I have to keep reminding myself. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to hear that again.
Okay. Yeah. I'm writing it down. Awesome. All right, beloveds.
And
see you next week. I'll
there,
send
there was a link. Yeah, thanks.
a link to what, Lenny?
I was remembering that you did send us a link earlier with Aditi maybe singing it.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's like in maybe 5 or 6 or something like that. Okay, thanks. That helps.
Yeah, it was 6. It was 6, 5. I guess you're right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All
See
right,
ya.
honey. Yep. Bye.